A 100-year-old refinery just caught fire twice in 3 years. 3 weeks before the second one, a fired safety inspector told a federal court he had been warning them this was coming. On May 8, 2026, at around 12:50 in the afternoon, a fire broke out in an operating unit at Chalmette Refining, 10 miles east of downtown New Orleans. Residents in Arabi in the lower Ninth Ward felt it in their houses. Tommy Tomaseo, co-owner of Rocky and Carlo's restaurant, watched about 60 lunch customers bolt for the door. "It was scary in the beginning," he said. "I thought somebody hit the building." A local school went into lockdown. Juveniles at the parish correctional facility were evacuated as a precaution. PBF Energy, the refinery's owner, says the fire was out in about 10 minutes, nobody was hurt, and fence line monitors detected no impact outside the plant. 10 minutes. That was the whole event. This is a refinery that has been running since 1915. PBF Energy bought it from ExxonMobil and Venezuela's state oil company in 2015 for $322 million. It processes roughly 189,000 barrels of crude a day, and this was not its first fire. In January of 2023, a tube inside a fired heater ruptured after overheating past 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit, releasing diesel, hydrogen, and methane into the air. Federal investigators found the cause was a mix of long-term metal fatigue and short-term overheating, the kind of thing that shows up when equipment runs past its limits without enough oversight. That same year, the Environmental Protection Agency hit the refinery with a Clean Air Act violation notice. Then, on March 20th of this year, a man named Glyn Montalongo filed a federal whistleblower lawsuit against Chalmette Refining and its parent company. He had worked there since 1996, most recently as lead inspector in the refinery's mechanical integrity program, the unit whose entire job is catching the kind of corrosion and wear that leads to ruptures. He says he flagged safety problems for years. He was fired in March of 2025 with no documented history of poor performance. 3 weeks after he filed suit, the refinery caught fire again. "I wasn't surprised," he told a local reporter, "but thankful nobody was killed." PBF's response was narrow. The lawsuit, they said, is unrelated to the incident and currently before the court. No investigation has confirmed a link between Montalongo's allegations and the cause of the May fire. That connection is timing, not proof. The cause is still under investigation. This is not the first time a refinery in this exact stretch of Louisiana has made national news for the wrong reasons. In August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina put the Gulf Coast refining industry on its back. The region supplied close to half the country's gasoline. Within 2 days, 95% of Gulf oil production and 88% of natural gas production were shut in. 47 platforms were destroyed outright. By early September, Gulf oil output had recovered to only 42% of normal. Combined with Hurricane Rita 3.5 weeks later, the two storms knocked out 1.3 million barrels a day of refining capacity, about 8% of the nation's total. 8% of the country's fuel supply gone in 2 days. And just a few miles from where PBF's refinery sits today, in the same flood-prone corridor of Street Bernard Parish, a different company's refinery, Murphy Oil, became the face of what can go wrong when that infrastructure fails. Storm surge breached the levees along the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal and flooded the plant with up to 18 feet of water. A 250,000-barrel storage tank, holding about 65,000 barrels of crude, floated off its foundation and ruptured. Roughly 25,000 barrels of oil spread across a square mile of residential neighborhood, damaging close to 1,800 homes. A Sierra Club representative later put it plainly, "If you know a hurricane is coming, you fill your tanks with extra water so they are too heavy to shift." Murphy didn't, and the tanks shifted. The company eventually paid out $330 million to settle claims from over 6,000 residents. One of them, Eileen Schwartz, told NPR the following year, "Now we're in the hands of Murphy." 20 years later, in 2025, engineers at Louisiana State University were still studying that spill because no state or federal law has ever required tank anchoring systems to prevent it from happening again. No law was ever passed. Nationally, the fallout from Katrina did not stay in Louisiana. Crude hit a record $70 a barrel. Gasoline topped $2.60 a gallon at the pump. Gas stations ran dry in Georgia, North Carolina, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Arizona, states nowhere near the storm. North Carolina's governor asked residents to stop making non-essential trips. The federal government tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and allied nations released 30 million barrels of fuel from their own reserves just to keep the country supplied. All of that happened because the United States refining system runs with almost no spare capacity. When a large piece of it goes down, there is no slack to absorb the hit. That is the through line connecting 2005 to now. A small, aging cluster of Gulf Coast refineries carries an outsized share of the nation's fuel supply, and the system has never built in much room for error. In 2005, the threat was a hurricane that took out roughly 8% of national capacity in 48 hours. In 2025 and 2026, it is not one storm. It is a string of individual equipment failures across the Gulf Coast. PBF's own refinery in Martinez, California, caught fire in February of 2025, causing an estimated $924 million in damage and taking most of a year to fully restart. Chevron's El Segundo refinery had a fire in October that analysts projected could push California gas prices up by 35 to 95 cents a gallon. Valero's Port Arthur refinery had an explosion in March of this year that took weeks to bring back online. The Energy Information Administration is projecting gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel inventories to fall to multi-decade lows sometime in 2026. The comparison has real limits, and they are worth stating plainly. Katrina was a single, instantaneous event that crippled an entire region's refining capacity within 2 days. The Chalmette fire in May affected an estimated less than 1% of national capacity and was out within 10 minutes, with no injuries and no confirmed release beyond the fence line. No source has put a hard number on how much the May 2026 fire actually moved fuel prices. Unlike El Segundo, where analysts gave a specific estimate, nothing that specific exists yet for Chalmette. The Murphy oil disaster, for all its proximity, happened at a different company's plant entirely, and the failure mechanisms are not the same. Katrina was a natural disaster nobody could stop. What is happening now looks more like the slower, quieter kind of failure, deferred maintenance, aging metal, a fired inspector who says he saw it coming and was ignored. What both eras share is not the cause. It is the shape of the risk. A fuel system built on a handful of century-old plants, packed into the same hurricane corridor, running at close to full capacity with almost nothing held in reserve. 20 years after Katrina, the tanks still are not required to be anchored. The mechanical integrity inspector who says he warned Chalmette about corrosion and safety gaps was fired before the fire happened, not after. The investigation into what caused the May blast is still open. Whether this refinery, or the next one down the Gulf Coast, holds until the next incident is not something history can answer in advance, but it can tell you how much room this country has left to absorb the answer if it goes wrong. Right now, that room is close to zero.